meeting to order at 6:02. All board members are present. Alice Todd will be a few minutes late, so she will be here and we'll welcome her when she arrives. The next meeting is October 22nd here at Canterbury Elementary School. So first up is public communication and correspondence. Anyone from Canterbury or Belmont want to speak? Okay, seeing none. Tonight's meeting is focused on the rationale sheets, so meeting with administrators. And I want to invite the advisory budget committee to come up. See Heidi and Jay and Edgar. Others may join us. So we're going to start out of order from your packet, and we're going to start with the curriculum proposed budget, Silas, which is towards the back, right before athletics.
Good evening, tomorrow.
Well, it says 1 of 1,
Oh.
so no.
Yeah,
I'm trying to help, but it's after BHS and before athletics.
Yep.
Okay. So Silas.
All right. Just kind of a quick overview. We have some programs that are supporting particularly math instruction and practice for elementary students, as well as elementary and middle school with IXL. Those programs had been funded through ESSER, which is now done. So that's where you see some increase in the electronic info section. And other than that, we're looking at curriculum resources, just continuing to finish getting what we need for literacy instruction at the elementary level. And along with that, just as things kind of shift, we've noticed a need for some science and social studies instructional resources as well. So those are under the curriculum adoption section. Happy to take any questions that folks have.
Just a general question, might be a heavy question, I'm not sure. But the ESSER funding, what did we do before that? Was this in the budget at that time? And then we got ESSER funding, we reduced the budget. And now we're going back to where it was.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yeah, and some of these programs we didn't have at the time, but IXL was not something that we had prior to ESSER, but it was something that they did implement through the ESSER funds.
And is it a progress monitoring tool, or is it to supplement instruction?
It's supplemental. We do use, it's got a lot of components. So it has a diagnostic tool for both math and ELA, and as well as like individual lessons. So at the middle school, they tend to use it a lot for supplemental instruction. At the elementary level, it's more one of our assessment measures that can get a fuller picture of how the students are doing in math.
So one question I have is, I'm not clear on new curriculum for, like I know I hear about wisdom. That's a new curriculum also. Is that all the purchase? Is that all under one of these headings? How does that work?
Yeah, so we are going to be giving you some more updates in the coming meetings about Wit and Wisdom. It's currently in a pilot, so right now most classroom teachers at BES are piloting it. At CES, they're not taking part in the official pilot, but everybody is using the materials that we got from Wit and Wisdom for their literacy instruction. So, like I said, I'll be updating you a lot more about that process. In this year's approved budget, there is money for elementary literacy instruction materials. We're hoping that Wit and Wisdom is it, and we can make those purchases. The reason there's a little bit more in next year's is when we actually budget it all out, including all the resources that we would need. It does go over a little bit. So that's budgeted based on Wit and
When
Wisdom.
you say more this year, which line are you talking? Adoption or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the 25,000 this year.
Question for you. So there's the increase, with the electronic stuff, the IXL and ELA. You say that it's supplemental to the curriculum. However, I have kids that come home and say differently, that it's the instruction piece is heavily relied on the different IXL platforms. I'm also seeing a $10,000 reduction in the curriculum adoption and curriculum development, which also supports a heavier reliance on technology versus direct instruction. Can you speak to that?
No, I don't think that we're relying on technology. It's certainly not in place of direct instruction. I think that the use of IXL at the middle school is something that we're still talking about a little bit. That's not feedback that I have heard yet, so that is ringing some bells for me.
Well, I've sat here in multiple meetings when you've been present, and I've brought up that concern of the reliance on the technology, so it can't be new information.
Well, then that's something that we'll need to look into for sure. But no, the reduction in curriculum development, as far as professional development and staff training, is really just for the sake of the whole budget, trying to keep things in balance. Do what we can.
So sorry, you can go first.
We're looking at the actuals around curriculum development, that's why there's a reduction there. Curriculum adoption, you see that reduction of $10,000 because the $15,000 that's requested for next year is to finish purchasing the teacher resources for literacy instruction. $25,000 is in the budget for this year. We're using to purchase the majority of those resources, particularly for the pilot piece. And then the $15,000 which should cover the rest of the teacher resources. So there is a reduction there. The other piece I want to point out is that you might see an increase of $15,000 in the district-wide curriculum for testing. That's because it was originally in the data management line, so you can see a reduction in the data management line and put it in the testing. So you don't necessarily see an increase in testing costs. It was just placed in the data management line and then it was placed in the testing curriculum line. So I don't want you to see that 15,725 is actual increase. It's just a movement from the data management line.
So we had heard over the past couple months that a teacher had spoken to us and said that it's about time that we looked at our proficiency skills. And then I also think about the need for extra professional development needs. Should we really be reducing this budget at this time, or should we be adding to it? I understand balancing for the sake of the whole, but if we're looking to increase those days, find ways to do that, I would think we would look for additional money.
I see more of a need for time than money in the budget. The challenge with getting what we need for teacher training and the time we need to collaborate, and it's complex. There's a lot to it. When we think about what our teachers need for training, the cost of like a consultant has gone way up. We're doing as much as we can through grant funding. Title IIA is really focused on professional learning, so that's where we take most of the money that we spend on teacher training, so that we can, use the general fund less. So for the past few years, that's been working for us. As like I said, the actuals bear that out. I don't know how long necessarily that can be upheld. If there were a line in my budget that I would want to see increase, that would probably be it. But again, I think what we're in most desperate need of is time, just teacher time, which isn't as simple as putting in the budget.
So that line would normally address work outside of contractual hours. So we can't require teachers to participate in that professional development. So this would potentially cover some summer professional development that we offer. We do cover that in Title IIA monies. If we were to provide professional development outside contractual hours, it's when it could potentially cover that as well. However, again, it's a gamble as to whether people are going to participate or not. Therefore, we're basing that number on actuals of what we have been offering for professional development. So this was something that I reduced because we weren't spending money.
So two questions come to mind for me. The answer actually, the third one's one on, I assume on the electronic info, these are subscriptions, I take it to some type of curriculum, right? So how is a decision made on what items to do subscription and electronic teaching with? Is that done at the department level? I'm not familiar a little bit with the high school.
Actually, all of these have been decisions made by district-wide committees.
Okay.
So we had a group that was particularly looking at math support, and that was 3 years ago. So we had representation K-8, and they were looking at what, the kind of shifting in focus of what math instruction was looking like, so that we could support students in the practice that they needed for different components of math.
And these committees have teacher involvement?
Yes, yeah, majority of teachers.
And so back on the teacher resources for literacy instruction, maybe this goes back to your client question, the adoption and the consistency of the teachers to understand how to effectively use these materials and integrate with their classes.
Yeah, so
I haven't seen that be consistent, and that's not knocking on the teachers, it's not knocking on the idea, but it raises the question in my mind. When you talk about professional development, I don't know if this is part of that or professional development for itself.
It's been a focus for a couple of years. So there's a few ways that teachers are getting professional development. One is the state has been offering a letters course, which is really in-depth into, the general term is science of reading, but it's really looking at using research and evidence to support specific teaching strategies. So the teachers have gotten a lot of really great background knowledge about how kids learn to read through that. And that has not been required. It's been almost all of our elementary teachers have volunteered to participate in that. And it is a big commitment. It's a big time commitment over 2 years. So that has been a huge help, is having that letters training. This year, as we're going through the pilot process for Wit and Wisdom, again, we've got some teachers who are officially participating in the pilot, and they have support with our district instructional coach and the reading specialist at Belmont Elementary once a week, because the program has a lot of resources. So their biggest challenge right now is narrowing down what they can actually do in the classroom. So it's a pretty similar process to what we followed with math in terms of making sure that teachers have the support they need as we're starting out. And I will have more in depth to share with the board in the next couple of board meetings, in terms of how and why we chose Wit and Wisdom to pilot and what the process is looking like. And then you'll be able to hear from teachers and student feedback as well in November.
So that, I don't know exactly what was my question, a lot of kind of picking up on what Andy was saying. So the $10,000 credit in the law for reducing my taxes, but the same token, you bring the technology into the teaching world. And my experience has been not as a teacher, but as in the private industry, you also got to bring your workforce up to speed on how to use it. Is there sufficient time and resources allocated so that these tools are being used effectively, people know how to use them effectively?
I would say it's not consistent across the board in terms of how, is the time we have enough? And so inconsistent in terms of how much time how much time teachers have at each school, and inconsistent in terms of the programs. So if I'm looking at IXL, Reflex Math, Zern, just as the math programs, supplemental math applications. IXL has gotten more time, Zern got more time when we first started it, but that has not been a big focus in the last couple of years. And it's important as we have turnover to make sure that all teachers are getting the support they need for all of those. So yeah, I think it's, again, I would say the greater need in terms of supporting teachers and getting them up to speed to be able to implement effectively, the greater need is time than money. As Michael said, the way we can use some of the professional development money is for teacher time outside of the contract, and that has just been a low interest level.
You need a month to teach it?
Yes.
Just a follow-up. You're talking about the literacy program, piloting and all that. Some teachers are piloting, some aren't. I think you said CES is not piloting, correct?
Yeah.
I guess my concern is, are you comfortable with the budget requests for next year if the pilot doesn't move forward?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's been kind of part of part of this process is just making sure that everybody is. We want to be transparent. We want to hear from teachers for how it's going. So it would be an ambitious timeline to say that we could decide before we need to propose a budget to the towns. I think I was feeling optimistic that we would, get in and teachers would get used to it and say, oh, yep, it's doing great. I don't know that we will have that answer yet. So in the event that we come towards the end of our pilot and teachers are saying, no, this is not going to meet our needs, meet our students' needs, the literacy committee last year that chose Wit and Wisdom, the other kind of finalist in that choice was CKLA, which is a very similar program. And we had been considering, do we pilot both? We decided to go with just one because if you pilot both and everybody likes it, then now what do? You've had teachers put a lot of work into 3 months of something they're not going to use in the future. So that is kind of a next option, or we're kind of looking again. So the main goal is We need something in teachers' hands that can help them instruct literacy effectively for our students. And we've got $25,000 this year that needs to be spent. So we need to come to a decision by the end of this year so that we can spend those monies on what's going to be best for our teachers and learners.
So, just say at the end of the year, you determine wit and wisdom isn't, for whatever reason. So then if we pick, can we use the 25,000 to pilot again?
Well, piloting is tricky.
So I know, we have to.
Can I put the deadline here? So I lay out a deadline basically, so just to be clear.
Yeah.
I asked for a deadline on the first day of November, like you said, because we're in budget season. And the request was to push that out. So I said, let's do this, let's bring something to the board, a recommendation to the board by the first meeting in December, because that's the time we can adjust our budget accordingly. Teacher resource materials, the teacher resources, the amount of money a year we're comfortable with, if the consumables that come along with wisdom that are also in this budget, if we're not going to go with wisdom, I don't necessarily want to budget for those consumables if we're not going to use that money. So I felt I've been sort of, Silas, and backing on this one, I've been pushing the decision making because of the fact that there's a good amount of money that's involved here. So I just don't want to carry money to the budget and we're not going to use them, particularly when I know we're looking for a tight budget. So he's going to give you an update at the first meeting in November how the pilot's going, and the recommendation to the board come the first meeting in December. I think that gets directly your questions.
Additional questions? Yes, Edgar.
So should we take that out for now, and then if for some reason we don't remember at the end of this process, it's not still sitting there?
Chief,
The
what?
50,000.
We will need that regardless, Edgar, so we'll need to continue to purchase teacher resources for an INC program. That 15,000 that's in there for next year, we'll need to leave that curriculum adoption monies in there because as you can see, we spend those monies.
Yeah.
Because those are teacher resources specifically that they will need to continue, whether it's with this pilot program that they adopt or another. So we wouldn't want to remove that, the curriculum adoption line.
Okay, so what was happening in the previous years when it was only around $3,000, $5,000?
We weren't in the process of looking at new curriculum.
So if you look at 21-22, 22-23 actual was 21,000. Then I'm guessing last year we didn't adopt a new curriculum, and then this year, right? Is that what's?
22-23 was for the adoption of a new math curriculum at the elementary schools. You can see what's adopted this year, the 25,000 is for the adoption of a new language arts curriculum at the elementary schools. And that 15,000 that's in there for next year is to finalize the teacher resources for a language arts program for the elementary schools, specifically teacher resources.
So going back to adoption, when you decide to pilot and you decide to adopt a curriculum, I'm not clearly understanding there's some kind of training program for teachers that are going to use that curriculum, and if there's money to pay for that, I mean, spend the money on the program. Not everybody, I guess they volunteer to go to this thing, and that tells me you're not getting full use out of it. So I go back to somebody's question on this curriculum adoption, the money there, and do a change in approach here.
Well, I think, so I just want to say the money for professional, not money, the time for professional development is outlined, professional development days is outlined in the contract with the union. So that isn't in here, in Silas's budget.
No, I understand that. What I don't understand, and this is just my ignorance, whatever professional development is, in my mind right now, it's a little separate than when you decide to go to an electronic curriculum. You train the teachers how to use it.
So that's the PD, professional development you're talking about, Jay, happens in-house during contractual hours.
Okay?
Okay, so there isn't a cost associated with that. However, our teachers that are piloting the language arts program, which was the elementary schools, we did write a small stipend in for those teachers into our Title IIA federal grant funds. So there is some cost associated with that, but it's being funded through grant funds. It's the time piece that Mr. Silas keeps referring to. It's not a big money, it's not a big cost. It's time to finding the time in order to provide that professional development. It's more of a
Yeah,
challenge.
and let's be honest,
You're not gonna see
time's
that
money.
as
You
long.
make time for the teacher, you're paying them outside of normal work hours, you're paying substitutes so they can
Right.
get this training. I get that. That's what, I don't know what bucket it was in, and I don't know if it's a big problem. Don't decide it's not a big problem, but, you know, if you're gonna invest in this, then I think we should be training the teachers how to use it.
And that's the current process that we're going through.
I do think it does speak to just listening to people between Silas and some others. Like, if we have all this supplement, I'm putting in air quotes, supplemental electronic information, how are we ensuring the turnover, that teachers know how to use them? Because we don't want to pay all this, well, I don't want to pay all this money if no one's using them. I'm talking the electronic material. So, you know, I would like to see, you know, to me, like, how are we ensuring that teachers know what the options are and how to use them? So they're not, that I know of, intended to be like, here's your math lessons for this week. Just let me know if you need something. So I would like to see that, because we do spend quite a bit of money on electronic stuff, which is important, but we want to make sure people are using them, I think, the right way, the correct way, not.
So how would you want to present yourself, that information?
Well, I heard, because what I heard Silas saying, if I'm capturing it incorrectly, but like a couple of years ago, I know you didn't call it Zeus, but it was some Zern. See, Zeus, Zern. So there was a focus on Zern. I don't even know what that is. It doesn't matter, but Zern. Now it's kind of moved to IXL. So are we underutilizing Zern because people are liking IXL? Then I'm like, well, do we need both? And there probably is a reason for both, but if people don't know the reason for both. So that's what I mean.
And if one teacher really likes this one, they really have to use it, are we saying, sorry, you're the only one this using it?
No, I know, that's what I'm saying, but I don't, so I heard you say like there was a shift and you want to make sure people know about it.
That reference is specific to professional development, so that was coming off of Jay's question about the PD or the electronic info. So when we first bring in some sort of new electronic info or supplement, there's professional development, it's heavy professional development at that point, and then we basically start weaning off of that. Correct me if I'm wrong, that's what the reference was. There's a shift from one to another, it was in the professional development focus.
Or, okay, well then, what about what is all of our electronic platforms that we're paying for, and what's the utilization on each? How about that? So then we know what is being utilized, what isn't. Do we want all of them? Do we not? Like, I don't know, because I don't even know what a lot of these are. But, and I don't want to take away supplemental information thing that's important to one teacher, and they're the only ones using it. But I don't know if we have a handle on that. Maybe that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
So you can pull that together for us. Great.
What's the lifespan of a curriculum?
Kind of depends. You know, I think for me, what matters is less what's the program and more, do we have common language, consistent instructional approaches, and a coherent progression of skills. And the nice thing about what programs do is they kind of package all of that together, and it gives teachers one place to go to get all of that. As long as those things are meeting student needs and working effectively, and teachers are able to implement them in a manageable way, then it's working for us. And when we see that it's not, then that's when we kind of get into, okay, is it a problem that we can tweak within this resource? Is it something that we can kind of train our way to fix? Or are we looking at, in the case of math 4 years ago, we were using a pretty outdated resource that current educational research supported a shift in the focus of instruction from procedure in math to concept. And so that's why we went and found a conceptual-based resource for that. Similarly, in ELA, the last adoption was Reading Street before I was here, and so much in the science of reading world is showing these are some things we need. So it's kind of like anything in education. There's a lot of kind of trends and new things come out that we know better, so we try to do better.
So I think also, Mark, to get to your point, so our curriculum, there's a difference between curriculum and resources.
Right.
So our curriculum, which is well laid out through our learning progressions from K-12 for all content areas, the curriculum involves our competencies, our standards, our learning targets, and our proficiency skills. That's the curriculum. What we're talking about here when it comes to budget are the resources the teachers use to deliver that curriculum. So the lifespan of a curriculum can be many years. It's the resources that change, and they vary as to when those resources change. Like recently, the state has said you need to use a literacy program that is based on the science of reading. It's research-based practices. So you have a choice of curriculums that you need to use, I should say resources you need to use to meet that requirement the state has put forward. So that's the shift that's been happening in districts, and we're in that shift right now. So, I just want to make sure that people understand that there's a difference between curriculum and the resources used.
So, are those shifts coming every 6 years, or are they coming every 10 years approximately?
Recently it's been, I would say for literacy, this shift has happened in the past 3 years.
Yeah, but going back before that, I don't know the last time that there was a big shift like this. I think if you looked at any specific content area, I would say in the range of 8 to 10 years is probably the pattern that I have seen, but it's hard to predict. It's a really valid question, but I wish I had a more definitive answer.
I got me worried now. Apologize for this is my first time through this process, but I just recognize that we spent 30 some odd minutes on 0.28% of the budget.
Right now.
And my concern would be that objectives, and goals I anticipate would be established for this. And then our job is to make sure that the budget adequately addresses those objectives and goals. So to spend time in here talking about the goals feels off track, but maybe that's the way it works. Off that. On the town level, it would be like, spending our town budget committee time starting with, the recreation budget, which is $100. So it's kind of food for thought, but I'm learning.
Other questions for science?
Thank you.
Thank you. special ed, which is first in the rationale sheets. Silas. Silas needed to be, but maybe else.
Just when the administrators are done with their session.
Oh, they can leave. When administrators are done with their section, you're welcome to stay, because it's pretty cool, but, yeah. Okay. Oh, Tanyelle's not here. She's at a family event.
I'll leave those to answer any questions.
Okay. Questions people have for special education?
So we had significant decreases in the tuition for special ed, and those are children that either aged out or moved out, correct? I see lots of decreases in other eval for OT. I see lots and lots of decreases.
Because we budget based on the students we currently have. We have no ghost children in their pattern of budgets.
You brought up tuition right on the first page. I guess my conclusion is, I would expect if the tuition goes down in middle school, it will go up at the high school.
Unless they move.
What's that?
Unless they leave the district.
And now, what you're seeing is students are no longer in and out of district placement and receiving the services that go along with that, which come in as contracted services, which is why your other eval line is down.
But yet, Sean, I think it's true, we normally, because Tanya talked about that before, if the student leaves, it's no longer elementary, moves into middle, the tuition cost shift.
The only question I have is, I'm dismissed this over the years, given the size of the number. Has anything changed on the front of the contracting? If I remember correctly, we talked about it a year or two ago. The district is basically having to chase the contract for some of the specialist services. Has anything changed there to get leverage with other districts to get more competitive pricing or better resources, or things are status quo in that area?
You know, because unfortunately, it's all based on the individual student needs, and that varies year to year. So you're continuing chasing those contracts and contract service providers, those costs continue to go up year after year because we're subject to those contracted services.
Are you asking, have we pooled together?
Right.
to do-
I get what you just said, but the question is leveraging other districts, so you've got more buying power, for example, and so the rate you're paying for that contractor, there, you have some control over your destiny, or better control over it.
So regionally, we have service providers that we contract out that there isn't an appetite for a regional pooling of use of those contract services because they vary so much. And we're also subject to the cost that those contract providers are going to basically provide us. So it's tough because I've actually brought this up to try to develop some sort of regional collaborative approach to utilizing these contract service providers. And through those conversations, the actual ability to schedule these contract service providers is very difficult because of the different demands of individual students in the different districts. So logistically, it's quite a challenge to fathom what that would look like in the area. But in the meantime, we're subject to providing the services, so we're contracting out with these service providers. And even these contracted service providers are having a difficult time finding people to work for them. These are, for-profit organizations that have been in the business for quite some time. So even those businesses are struggling to find people to provide the services that are required.
So if we compare the special ed, if you had everything up in the rationale sheet and then compare it to the special ed in the budget detail, basically the difference between the two would then be salary and benefits.
Yes. Yep.
Where it says materials were previously covered by a grant help side?
So those were supplies that were usually, or assessments, just as noted in here, the specific assessments that were covered in our IDEA grant. This year, we saw a reduction of $10,000 in our IDEA grant, and we're prioritizing, because we're not anticipating additional monies. We're not looking at an increase of 25, 26 for IDEA monies coming in. And we have 3 positions that are funded through IDEA, which is a special ed coordinator and 2 case managers. So those positions are currently being funded through our IDEA grant. So we're not comfortable, we're prioritizing those positions, using those grant monies for those positions. And we're starting to roll the supply costs into the operating budget compared to bringing a position into the budget, which is a significant increase. So we're not anticipating the IDA grant to be able to cover those supplies next year. Therefore, we're rolling those in to try and have a smaller impact on the operating budget.
Additional special? Go ahead.
So on the other eval, so just help me understand, I see function occupational therapy, that's like the biggest piece of this sort of what might be considered the discretionary part of the budget. What is that? Other eval, I see CESD, SPMS.
So other evals is, again, that could contain not only occupational therapy that a student would receive, it could also could be psychological services that we're not able to provide with our school psychologists that are our own employees that would fall in that. So any other support services that we're not able to provide with our own employees come out of that other eval.
Be like
Or other
teachers-
evaluations needed for testing and identification.
Teachers of the visually impaired, teachers of deaf and hard of hearing, like, we don't have a population big enough to require.
Okay, no, I understand the component, I also imagine it's particularly difficult to forecast.
Challenge.
At least we're starting off with big reductions.
Yeah.
This year. As a percentage of the total budget with special ed, approximately what's the percentage? Has anybody ever took a look out to other districts and compared where we're running versus other districts?
I have not, it's certainly something, I can run some numbers, and I believe there's some information on the state site that I can get some of that information.
Okay, I'm curious.
As for the overall mark, I'm comfortable saying that all districts are seeing a significant increase in these costs.
Yeah.
I think the other thing, so I'm just, so because I work in this field with special education, the harder part is knowing what's in the IDEA grant and the amount of the IDEA grant that districts get vary from district to district based on a formula. So we can see what's in someone's general fund, but that's not going to fully see the cost. So I agree, I think running those numbers is great.
What impacts that?
Population is one of the biggest pieces.
But there's some other information on the DOE 25
They might
that I might be able to get information from.
I think it's great, I just, depending on what you can pull,
Right.
some of the stuff you can't see.
Correct. And it doesn't tell us the population of students.
Correct.
So, I mean, we may have, say, 50 students that we're servicing, another district might have 100.
Right, so I was going to say, is there any way to know at least how many students we're serving?
Tanya would have that information.
Yeah, we have, as for last year, our annual report, every year, our
that's the
annual
annual
report gives you a
report.
full detail of
The students served,
Yeah.
okay.
that we serve.
Yeah, but it's not going to tell me other districts.
Right.
It's very difficult to compare to other districts because a district, including ours, we have one student that is an out-of-district placement that's over $200,000,
Yeah.
where other districts might not have that. So, you can see a total cost, but you're not going to see what the costs associated with the total dollar amount.
But-
relate to.
Would be interesting to see.
Interesting, yes. Actionable, what would you do
I
differently?
don't know.
If you had the data, what would you do differently? I think it doesn't sound like there's a lot that you can, because it's so individualized and specific to your student population.
Population.
Unless someone has a brilliant idea for how to deliver the service, right, in a more cost-effective way. But you got to think that you would know that.
Well, that's where, once, if you start seeing an increase in numbers, then you, and I think we actually kind of did that for this upcoming year, where we did less contracted services and actually pulled, did it in-house, or
Yeah, the BCA.
providing employee, and I don't know if any of that information would help with that.
Yeah, and again, I remember conversations last year with other BAs, and there was a BA who, when they were putting their budget together, their budget more than doubled because 5 students moved in with special needs. There was nothing they could do about it.
Special ed budget, or?
The entire budget doubled because of the special ed costs, because they were severe needs. You're not going to find that information by looking at the budgets and the numbers of special ed versus the total.
Anything else? Okay, seeing none. CES.
Hello, everybody. So, try to keep things pretty level, but did want to draw your attention to a couple of increases, specifically our specific department, which is up over the current budget year. That's mainly for consumable supplies to support a new literacy curriculum. And then the other area is replacement furniture. We put together the replacement cycle over the next few years to anticipate replacement needs. In doing that process, recognized a need to replace furniture in the art room. The chairs and tables and furniture in that room, which is actually a shared space, music and art, are over 20 years old and in need of replacement. So those are kind of our 2 biggest areas of change. Any questions?
I have a question. So the special department CES,
Yes.
That is the consumables for the curriculum?
Yes.
But didn't Silas have budget is for consumables for curriculum?
Not the consumables, so in Silas's budget, it's specific to teacher resources. These are hard resources that teachers use year after year. Consumables would be workbooks that students would be using.
Okay.
So that's
All those consumables come out of the school's budget.
yeah, see Mr. Hill's budget too. Maybe that's
So this is estimated based on if we pick.
Right, so we got the current numbers for Wheaton Wisdom as our guide for this, and requested by grade level and by per student cost, and included 9% shipping, because that's what they're charging this time.
Again, that number can change from December. The recommendation is brought forward to the board and move forward with it.
General question on furniture, not necessarily CES or district-wide, but I think I saw like stacking chairs.
Every.
I'm assuming if this goes through, we would buy it all, or say something rather, everybody do it.
Everybody buying 4 chairs.
That's one thing we always look for in the deal when it comes to bulk purchasing. So if we have multiple schools purchasing the same items or even different items from the same vendor, we look to see how we can save $1. And I recall last year, Allison, we were really asking for that furniture cycle, so we so we did put that in place, just by the trace on a furniture replacement cycle.
I have one additional question, but I'm not sure if it's right or wrong. So you have the consumables in the special department, it was like 4,700, but BES has it under print media, and their increase was only 4,600. Don't they have like a significantly larger student population and staff? Would that be?
So keep in mind that there are multiple items that make up that line.
Okay.
Okay, so it's not just the consumables that are in that line, there are multiple other items that are in that line.
I got it.
Just to be in line.
Well, and his print media would be those Witten Wisdom consumables. We have specific definitions that we go by for Debbie.
Yeah, because Mr. Hill's consumables are under print media, BES, consumables, literacy workbooks.
Unless it has it on the wrong line, then it should be on the wrong line.
Oh, yeah.
So workbooks would be under print media because they're a printed item that you purchase. There may be some other things if you are buying Blackline, Masters, those would not be under print media. So it depends what's being purchased.
Your print media, CES's print media is about the same. So your consumables are up 4,700.
And a big portion of that is the Witten Wisdom consumables.
The literacy workbooks, then they should go to
Then it should
print.
be print media.
We can make that adjustment.
Yeah.
It's approximately $600 per grade level.
For consumables, for CES, or for
So we'll make that adjustment for the current meeting.
sorry, I know you said 5 grade level, but is it? Because
Anymore, AES, is it based on class size?
Yes.
Absolutely.
any other questions for this? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. EES.
Good evening, everyone. Doing all right. Quick summary of the budget overall, you can see it down a little over $10,000 at EES. One of the significant reductions, we finished our whiteboard installation, so that replacement equipment counts significantly, and then you can see we do have the increase in there. It's about $7,600 for consumables for what we're doing. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Mr. Hill? Not a question, but a comment. And not my favorite thing is that there's a max and lows line item. I thought that was, there's nothing in it though. I know.
Hasn't been for a long time.
Yes, you have.
Quick question, what's in the special assemblies line? It's a good sized number.
Yep, the majority is our Prescott Farms Environmental Education Program. So it's a naturalist that comes to school, provides programming for each grade level. Teachers meet naturalists and determine what they're going to use for content based on their standards.
And forgive me because I'm probably going to ask some questions because those of you who are experienced with this are going to look at the difference column. I'm looking back sometimes at the budget column, just want to make sure I understand some of the larger buckets
Yeah, absolutely.
that are out there, so.
No need to apologize for any of that.
Otherwise, I didn't have any other major questions, just trying to understand
Yeah.
what we're looking at.
What's R&M?
Repairs and maintenance.
Thank you.
You did?
Yeah.
You did well. He wasn't looking at me, so that's fine.
Not your first time at the table.
I might have asked that same question last year.
Other questions?
On the, there's a replace new furnace, BES, is 942, and then there's also another one that says replace furnace BES. What is the difference there?
One's new furniture and one's replaced. So it's already furniture that they have that they're replacing.
Oh, it's furniture, not furnace?
Furniture, right.
Okay. And the superintendent said there's a cycle now
Yes,
of how things are getting replaced.
to try and avoid any swings in the budget from year to year.
Is there a, just on that, do you only put larger items on that, or do you?
No, there's definitely some offshoots, like if a teacher needs another cabinet for a classroom, we go as a, it would go on the replacement cycle.
Okay, that's
Replacement
fine.
cycle is for
Major purchases.
The budget might include some offshoot items.
Because I'm guessing our classroom tables were on cycle for the elementary school. Anything else?
No, not specific to BES. What we talk about is structural questions. For things like capital replacement, furniture, and items like that, is there any mechanism to level fund it every year where it goes into a capital, goes into a reserve fund, and you replenish that in that reserve fund? That way that you don't have the spikes, you have a background amount of money that the schools can draw on.
We talked about, we started talking about that last year. We'd have to put, we talked about, we'd have to put a warrant article to establish that, but it was a discussion item. So
Just a thought process.
Yeah.
You could actually take, you could zero the line in every school's budget for this replacement capital and then use it to fund the warrant, you use it to fund the capital.
If I remember correctly, the way the conversation went last year, because there was such a spike in the budget, we did not want to put in a warrant article to ask people for even more money on top of the budget. So we sort of used this sort of schedule as a workaround for now, but it's definitely something.
I think too, correct me if I'm wrong, but right now we're, at least for the next few years, we're relatively small needs with kitchen stuff and a whole bunch of furniture that need replacement. I mean, I haven't seen what the longer range plan is, but I remember last year there was some big ticket items.
Not that something right now.
I'm sorry, what?
Not lots of wood right now.
Yeah, okay, sorry. So-
Yeah, last year was the kitchen equipment,
Right,
2
yeah.
buildings, and that was a total anomaly. But we did put in the expendable trust for kitchen equipment.
Right.
But
I think, Bob, maybe that partially answers your question. You're the politics side right now as far as capital expenditures, so pretty small numbers expenditure.
Yes.
so I think we'll make note of that to circle back to whether we want to add a warrant article for furniture.
Yeah, you would craft it sufficiently broadly that you can cover the needs that type of consumable material. You know, if you just look at the town budget, right, there will be something for equipment. It's a fairly generic description, you know, fire and rescue equipment,
covers them all.
Yep.
I think it's just because last year the budget increase was so much that we didn't want to ask for anything additional on top.
I feel like we also got bogged down in details of, well, we're going to list all the furniture. What's
Right.
your cycle going to be?
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea.
I think it saved time if you got the list, improved the budget, and you don't have this discussion every year. I mean, Michael and his staff have to.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's so
then
many
you
lists
just
you got.
budget a replenishment
Right.
for the fund, it's flat, and basically level and carries you to an amount going forward. And you're not talking about 6 chairs here, 12 there.
Yeah.
The administrators
It's
will
not
just
forget
make their requests internally for whatever approval mechanism.
The choir producers comes to mind.
No, it would not be a warrant every year for funding, correct? It would be part of the general budget to fund it.
No, just as we do with any of our trust funds, we would request additional monies to cover that fund, because you're going to be pulling from that fund each year, so you want to replenish it. But we potentially could set that up so that it's coming out of end-of-year fund balance, based on the priority list that we do. So,
Because I don't know that we can do what you were describing.
There's actually 2 ways to do it.
Okay.
You can put a line item in the budget and disclose that this is going to fund the expendable trust. Not out of end-of-year funds, it's just going to, the budget's going to be increased for that purpose. So that is one way to do it. The other way to do it is a separate warrant article at the end of the year, presented to the voters to take, either raise and appropriate funds, which would add to the budget, or raise and appropriate using end-of-year reserves. So,
Which has been our common practice.
which has been the common practice, but there are the different ways to do that.
But we still, in order to take money out of the trust,
You would have to have a
we'd
public
have
hearing.
to have a public hearing, so we couldn't just go to Michael. I don't know how it works.
Right.
But what you were describing seemed way simpler than,
I would have to defer to Debbie's knowledge of how the school board is named as agents to expend. It's like select boards are agents to expend on certain funds, doesn't require a public hearing, and then all the hearings are need.
right.
Yeah, it's totally different with the towns,
Right.
but in the schools, any expendable trust, we have to have a public hearing.
Which,
But it's a school board function that
Right,
you
yeah,
in the
which is
regular
fine.
meeting.
Yeah.
If the warrant article failed, would we be unable to purchase
Correct.
replacement furniture though?
You would be unable to put money into, you can't take money out of an expendable trust, you could still purchase furniture. The warrant article is actually to put money in to an expendable trust for furniture replacement.
I didn't want to complicate things.
Or just create it.
Minimum
I mean, if it was created already and, in subsequent years you wanted to put money in, and they said, no, you can't put money in, but you can still put money out.
yeah, so, yeah, it's not
Yeah.
a no, it's no, it doesn't, no on that. There's a reason to be able to put the money in, but we can still.
Right, if we have money in
Public
there.
hearing, purchase furniture, if they have money in there.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing, I know Bob wants to move on, but thinking about the parking lot and capital budget. So if I understand the way this would work, you put the money in expendable trust, and if you get the help even with budget time, this does not increase the budget other than what you're asking to put in the expendable trust for that year. So when you have a big lumps like you did with the kitchen stuff, it's not a shock to that year's tax rate.
okay. EMS. Questions for Mr. Pope and Mr. Tursi?
See the difference of, I just want to make sure this one has minuses instead of parentheses for reduction from last year to this year.
So the grand total was up on, so if you look on page 4,
Yeah.
total increase is $2,160.
I have finance.
I have minuses.
Are we talking middle school?
You're looking at VA.
Oh, we're at EMS.
Oh, VHS has one, sorry.
You went a little further.
That was just
I went a little
formatting.
further, sorry.
Sorry, that was formatting, it was a bit late at night.
Well, it's been a long week.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. EMS.
So a fourth row riser, I don't know necessarily what that is, I said, that's based on members in the EMS music programs.
Yeah, so we're looking to add another row to that riser section, and that number actually includes 3 of those back rows with the back railing to make sure kids are safe, they're standing on the 4th row.
For chorus and band
That mean,
and performance.
Seems largely offset by the reduction in the furniture.
Yeah.
So it's not a big number, I am curious on page 3, robotics. How does, is there another place where robotics club gets funded, or is this it? I'm just thinking back 2 years ago, we had that one.
So robotics actually has a couple of different sources,
Okay.
Both high school and middle school. We get a grant through the state that covers a portion for each of those programs.
Okay.
A couple of years ago, they added money to the budget. So the general fund has a portion that we pay towards the robotics program in the middle school and also in the high school.
Okay.
And then they also do like fundraising, and they get sponsors, and that money is within the student activity funds in robotics. So
So as
those,
passionate as that club is, we have an input this year, so it's not going to be a surprise in the session.
Well, we can't guarantee
I know it's not
surprises
guaranteed,
in the
but-
deliberative session, Jay. We can predict that would be nice, but this, correct me if I'm wrong, that $6,300 that's in there for robotics is based on that 12,000.
Correct.
I wasn't really questioning the number, I'm really
Yeah.
questioning.
yeah, that was based on what was added at the deliberative session.
And robotics is on the October 22nd agenda
Okay.
as well.
Proposal.
Well, yeah, it's on the agenda, but the proposal from Appendix B.
Does anybody have any sense if there's going to be any other groups that are going to be passionate like that one was?
So
I mean passionate in a good way, but
one thing to remember is that year, the grant that they.
I know, I remember the deal. And
So
we
they
cut it.
weren't sure if they were gonna get it, so this kind of helps out with that.
Yeah,
And then when those things get delayed, that's at least they're getting started with their season.
okay.
But again, this is the second year of the 2-year grant. I have no idea if there's going to be a grant going forward.
But then this money though is, at least in the proposed budget, is here.
Correct.
Dues and fees line for the robotics? Are you checking something in there for competitions and?
It looks like that money got moved up to supplies.
So when we originally put the money into the budget, it all went into supplies because we were not sure where it was going to be used.
Okay.
We do not overspend the general fund amount. Some may be paid out of dues and fees if they need to register before the grant is approved. So it may
there's
come out of there,
flexibility, but they
but
take care of
there's
it.
flexibility, but the bottom line is they don't go over the total amount approved in the budget.
Other questions about?
I have one. Why is music a co-curricular? Like it's listed with the clubs, right? That should be your own site. Isn't music its own department?
Music is its own department, but if they're going to all states, then that's co-curricular. There is a music program that goes to those competitions, which is part of co-curricular.
And we're subject to some of these codes too, right?
Other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So last year was $10,000 for replacing furniture. Now it's $13,500. What is being replaced?
So you can see it in the note, the stacking chairs, those are classroom sets and tables, as well as stools and shelving.
Okay.
So that's getting rid of some old furniture that needs some some updated new furniture, so that would be your replacement furniture.
But it's not for a set department?
Not necessarily. We can look at the specifics for that. I mean, that would be for specific classrooms, not departments.
Oh, okay.
At the middle school level.
Yeah. You won't be going to like special ed or department or anything?
No, these are for classroom sets at specific grade level.
And since there was an increase, do you have a projection of, are we gonna go like 16,000 next year? On the turnover of the equipment?
Oh, hopefully not. That's why we put the replacement cycle into play, so that we have an understanding as to what we're going to be asking every year. And I really like Bob's suggestion of putting a trust fund, establishing a trust fund, so we can pull from that every year compared to seeing these increases in the operating budget.
Yeah.
Some of the schools say what furniture is for, it's spelled out. Whereas here, this is staff and chairs, tables. If I'm a parent or I'm going to another house, it's nice to know what it is that we're replacing. I have no idea what condition it is. I'd be curious. Just more details as far as specifically. Like, I think one of the schools at the second grade classroom. For the middle school, it would be great.
So you guys haven't seen the 5-year plan or whatever? Michael's-
The replacement schedule?
Pardon me?
You mean the replacement schedule?
Yeah.
I've not seen it.
Okay, I think that's a question you asked. I mean, I don't think you really want
Just
to.
something perfect for the future.
Yes. It's in some details of what's being requested, so I have the details of what is being requested to make up the overall line. I just didn't necessarily think if the board wants to know something as simple as a $200 piece of furniture, but it does vary. I see your point. It does vary sometimes coming from one school to another as to the specifics that go into descriptions.
So maybe I'm missing.
Family would see that though. As,
Like, even myself, like, looking to say, do I think we should do this? If I'm going to be at the school for a meeting next month, I might come a little bit early to the meeting and check out the furniture.
yeah.
How bad is it? I wouldn't know where to go.
So last year, we did a lot of cafeteria tables, and this year, there's like stools and stacked chairs. So if we go forward with creating a trust for this, maybe we can take this kind of vision of the cycle and put it into a plan to coincide with that.
Like we do.
Similar to what you have in
Yes.
building around technology.
Well, I interpreted what you said, that there's a multi-year list, probably maybe some budgetary estimates for each year when you're proposing extra money. So in this forum, those that want to look at the list, I'd say look at the list, but I don't know that you want to get into individual discussion. If the list satisfies you, right? And the money's what it is. Correct.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's hard to do, Debbie, but one of the things that might be of value in looking at these various requests is to see, so we have $10,000 budgeted for the current year, right, against that line item. It'd be interesting to see, now we're sitting in, October, what's our year-to-date? Is that hard to put into these reports? What have we spent so far?
It could be put into the reports, but I mean, we run vendors every week, so it changes every week. So, I mean, I could put the information in based on whatever the
Yeah, I don't know that it would matter on the individual, on a lot of the
Yeah.
line items, but on some of the line items, it might matter, right? So if you budgeted $10,000 for this year, we spent $400 so far. Okay, well, does that mean next year needs to be larger? Probably we haven't gotten to yet. And then.
Well, it also depends, because last year in Canterbury, we ordered the furniture for the library, and year-to-date, it was February before we got invoiced for the furniture. So it's kind of difficult. We had ordered it, but the lead time was so long, so it can be misleading.
I don't think your comment's limited to furniture, is it?
No.
Yeah.
No, but that was one example. I mean,
Yeah, no,
there's other
just
things
example.
that have longer
Can
times.
school districts encumber funds?
Yeah.
Okay. So you could, if you had a large purchase that was going to roll over, that you had budgeted, raised it for taxation this year, but hadn't actually gotten it done, you can contract for it, encumber the funds, so it doesn't have to be paid.
Absolutely. And the board can reserve funds for a special purpose.
My only question out of all this discussion was there an action? Me personally, I think for the board members that want to see the list, I assume it covers multi-years and some estimate. I think I heard that, right? And that way maybe this conversation will be smaller. It's an enjoyable conversation.
Do people want to see the list? I have no interest in seeing the list, but if you want to see it, I'm sure. I just don't, but
I like the idea of putting together some sort of informal capital improvement plan.
Yeah, that way.
That makes sense to me.
That could help drive the
I agree with
conversation
that.
for a potential trust fund.
I just don't want to know about $50.
Well, what I'm saying is,
I just don't.
listening to people talk, if you know there's a list, you know it's multi-year, you know approximates this, and the only conversation in my mind in furniture every year is, hey, it's keeping with our list. I would just want to know the details.
Yeah. The large. Anything else with BMS? Mr. Finch, I love that your girls are having a good time.
I've only had to go out there about 30 times. It's nice.
They're having fun.
Yeah, sure are.
But you're the only one that's being bothered by it.
Yeah, I know, I should have said
A typical parent thing.
That's-
Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. So the BHS budget, we really tried to be cautious with the number of our lines. You see a lot of lines that have actually dropped this year from past years. At least part of that was in recognition that we were going to have a few areas specifically that were asking for increases. One of them, I'm sure you saw a significant increase in the CTE tuition line. So that is what we pay to both the Hewitt Center and the Winnisquam Ag Center. We don't presently have any students going to the Winnisquam Ag Center. However, the Ag Center is actually adding programming. They're also rebuilding most of their facility. I think everyone in the region expects that there's going to be a renewed interest in going to the Ag Center. The cosmetology and precision machine shop work are the two new programs. Cosmetology has been something that the Hewitt itself has thrown around for a long time. I think that actually years ago they had that program, but they got to a point where they phased that one out. So I would expect that we're going to have an increase in the number of kids who are trying to go to the Ag. We had a pretty steady line for a few years there where we had anywhere from mid-40s to low 50s in terms of students who were participating in our CTE programming. This year.
Sorry, for those of you who don't know, CTE is voc ed.
Yeah.
It's vocational education.
Yeah, career and technical education. So the mid-40s to low 50s was a pretty common number, and then this year it spiked to 64. There are laws around making sure that all of our students who wish to participate in programming like that have access to it. So you see a significant jump here, but it really is the more recent actuals are what's driving that request.
The curiosity on that, you mentioned in one of the previous years that not all students finish their programs. Is, off the top of your head, is that a pretty high percentage that finish, or is it a low percentage?
Oh, the vast majority finish.
Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of the programs, or most of the programs at the Hewitt are also 2-year programs. So if a student gets into that in their junior year, it's very likely that they're at least going to try to pursue the senior year. Some of the programs, the year 2 sections are more competitive, and you almost have to have kind of pass muster in that first year for them to bring you back for the second year. But most students are at least interested in coming back for that year two that they get into year one.
That was one of my questions.
Yeah.
Increasing this from 50 to 70 students, is there room in those CTE programs
Yes.
to accept our students?
Yeah, Mr. Tercey and I are both members of the Regional Advisory Board for the Hewitt. We've already had one meeting earlier this year, and Dave Warrender, who's the director there, talks about, he gives us a spreadsheet every year of the number of students who are in programs that we have participating in programs. Other schools, how many they're sending, but very rarely do we get into situations where our students are getting rejected. They take as many as they can. A couple of the programs are higher level of interest. Automotive has been in some years. Health sciences has been a big one at times, but it really ebbs and flows, and that's one of the difficult things that both the Regional Advisory Board and the folks at the Hewitt battle with, is trying to figure out even their staffing levels. Like, do we need to add sections of this because we're seeing a 3-year trend where more and more kids are interested in this, but if they bring a teacher on and then, it just drops off, which it does sometimes, then it's a challenge for them for sure. And they're relying on all these different sending schools to have interest as well.
So how's that interest generated? Does the school have a way of, like, documentation won't work, giving kids exposure to what's available?
Yes.
Okay.
So every sophomore gets a presentation from both representatives from the Hewitt Center and the Ag Center. They come to us, and then we send the groups out to do tours of the Hewitt. Again, with the lower interest in the Ag Center over the past few years, it hasn't been as constant that we would send a whole group or a whole sophomore class that direction. It's more, hey, let us know, let our counseling department know if you have any interest in seeing the Ag Center, and we'll arrange a visit. When I was actually the assistant principal at Winnisquam, I remember groups coming and we would just host them and they would do tours and stuff like that.
You may have answered my question, but it's different than what you just said.
Sure.
Do all the students at some point early in their high school
We invite all
experience,
students.
do they get exposure to everything that's offered so they have some understanding and think about
Yes,
what
in their sophomore year.
Okay.
Yeah. The Hewitt has tried to expand more of their programs and even start to reel in some sophomores, but 95% of the kids, actually probably a greater number than that, are juniors and seniors.
Yeah.
So that's something that during student sophomore years, that's a lot of interactions the kids have with their school counselors to try to get that into their schedules. The other two, one of them is really a specific line, it's a series of lines. You see NEASC costs, that's our accreditation, that's all broken down. Some of the contracted services are actually internal positions where we need to almost essentially stipend out some of the major roles that we play in the building, that teachers play in the building, I should say. Next year, we would anticipate in the spring of 2026 to be what's called our collaborative conference, where we host a group from other schools and some folks from NEASC. That's for a lot of that travel line, because we have to put them up in hotels and pay for meals and stuff like that. Our liaison is Francis Kennedy, and he basically, in a shorthand, answered the year between what's called the collaborative conference, which what these costs are, and the decennial visit, the big one, is kind of an off year. So what I would probably anticipate is, assuming that this is approved and the 2026 collaborative conference takes place, the 26-27 NEASC lines would drop, and then they would rise again in 27-28 on our decennial visit. Okay. And the last line, the last area that had significant increase was testing through the counseling department. Right now, we are members of the data team in the district. This year, Julie Hobbert, one of our school counselors, and I are members of the data team. And to some degree, we go to the data team meetings and we don't have anything to say, because K through 8, there's a lot of consistency in terms of testing. The STAR testing is a big one that's talked about often, but we don't do STAR testing at the high school. Students don't do their state test until 11th grade when they take the SAT. We don't know, and STAR and all these other tests and the SAT do not align. You can't look at results that kids are getting in middle school with some of those assessments and make a direct line between how they're doing here and how they will likely do as juniors on the SAT. So the only data we have right now is we offer our juniors the opportunity to take the PSAT. Well, there's not a whole lot of time between in the fall, juniors take the PSAT, we get the results back, kids get the results back, and they have some time to practice. But we don't have an opportunity to adjust any of our instruction or recognize that there are instructional gaps that we need to patch in order for kids to be more prepared for the test. So one of the significant considerations that we're looking to do is actually expand the PSAT from freshman year through junior year. So actually our students will have 3 opportunities to prep that. We'll get more data on our students from freshman year moving on, and it gives our teachers an opportunity to, again, address those areas of need. There's really no way, there's no time for them to do it right now, because we don't get the results back until it's almost time to take the SAT. So those are the 3 big areas that I wanted to highlight.
So would that be something that all students would participate in?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So
Would they be, like, have the option to participate in, or would they be required to participate?
I mean, you can opt out of testing. You know, kids have done that consistently. We would want as many kids to take it as possible. It wouldn't be anything that we would put on a transcript. It's not something, and we would make sure that kids are aware of that, and parents are aware of that as well. It is genuinely just data for the student, the parent, and the teachers to recognize areas of need.
Why, maybe this is a state thing, so if we take kids that have an IEP, that would be not a good idea to push them in this direction. But other than that, if there's money in the budget to take this
Can you
test,
speak up, Jay?
why would, yeah, I'm just curious, take out students on IEP or some issue that really would be serious to make them take some standardized testing. But if there's money in the budget to pay for the test, and that's what I think you're saying, then why wouldn't you want the bulk of the student population to take it? Why make it optional? I mean, it's great data.
Right. We would say we want everybody to take it. We would promote the idea that everyone would take it, but the state is very consistent in terms of allowing students and parents to opt out of even the SAT. What's really interesting and super fun is that we actually get, use the word dinged, I think that's the professional term, right? When we have too many students who opt out of a state testing, and yet all they have to do is sign a piece of paper saying that they're opting out. So we don't promote it, we don't want kids to do it, but it's very easy for them to opt out and for parents to get them opt out.
That's true across elementary
Correct.
and middle as well, so it's any state.
Well, that was a great decision.
We allow,
Yeah.
New Hampshire allows an opt-out, but the federal government does not.
So, yeah, there's a disagreement between them. I would also say, just to clarify something you said, we have special education students who do state testing.
No, I know, but there's probably some circumstances where stress level, where, we don't need to get it right.
Yeah,
I recognize there's some
sure.
people that can get like that like that.
That's probably honestly where some of those opt-outs come from. But additionally, students oftentimes in an IEP have additional time on standardized tests. So we will have one group of students on SAT day, you know, kind of the majority of students are in there, but we also have an accommodated area. So that way, you know, students are on a different pace. They might get 50% additional time. So some kids, SAT day actually becomes SAT day and a half. So they come back the next day and they wrap it up in order to provide that accommodation.
So this would take students out of the classroom?
PSATs would be one day a year. And right now, our juniors do that. And so it would be an opportunity, honestly, for us. It's a very awkward day when we have juniors doing PSATs. We've been doing it off-site at LRCC. There's a lot of challenges in that because we don't control that environment at all. There's IT issues that come into play on that. So if we can control it, and it's a day that we are dedicating to, we'll call it data gathering, then I think it's actually something that we can pull off very well.
Comment. I appreciate the linearity, the 38% increase in the budget and a 40% increase in the number of students doing tuition vocational ed. So that's adjust the rest of it without taking every line apart, this budget is pretty tight. I would also note that the 5-year run rate on this budget is a little frightening. Because the 5-year run rate on the budget is a little, or the trend line is a little frightening, right? Because it's up 107% since 2022 school year. I don't know how much of that's, I don't know if that's controllable.
Again,
No.
that CTE tuition line is a huge jump.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's also interesting about that is we don't know what the tuition number will be for next year. That's not even information that we get until later in the school year. So this is an approximation, based on the previous years.
So if I understand your comment, yours is the overall budget. This particular budget doesn't trend upward right now, right?
Other than the one line.
Other than the one line, right?
And they track, and they trend right together.
So when you talk on the trend rate on the budget, you're talking the overall budget, which we haven't gotten a figure this year, right?
Well, this particular budget, if you look at it, just look at the grand total of this section of the budget.
Yes.
5-year run rate.
So your comments are reflecting to this.
Yeah. And just sorry, I apologize for not knowing, tuition at Hewitt, you mentioned that a couple times. Who is that?
So our students attend our regional career technical education center is called Hewitt.
Okay.
And that is located in Laconia, attached directly to Laconia High School. And our students go there for any of the career technical courses that they're interested in doing. There's also one in Winnisquam, and that is expanding the programs next year to include 2 new programs. The majority of our students go to the Hewitt.
Thank you. So Bob, I know you probably played with the numbers that you got the spreadsheet. Debbie, so I wasn't, so I'm curious, if you take out the reduction for the special ed, the 300-something thousand reduction, and you take out the Hewitt, what would be basically the percentage growth year over year on this piece of the school budget?
I'd have to go back and plug it through, because what I was struggling with was filtering the budget, and I
haven't done that myself, and if it's 3-4%, that's kind of like with everything else, but if it's like 10%, 15%, that would be different, in my mind.
My overall view is that it looks pretty controlled,
That's why I
other
agree, yeah.
than these major drivers.
So 70 students, that's about a quarter of the students in high school that are going to be going to some kind of outside program.
A little less than
a quarter.
Yeah, a little like 22 or something. But one thing I've heard from teachers is that students that leave to other programs are having to leave 15 minutes during the class. And then also there's an overlap in some classes in which they're coming in later. And so because we're in the 80-minute teaching, some teachers are actually adjusting their teaching to the period in which everybody's sitting in the classroom and they have everybody's attention. So as far as the 80-minute teaching time, we're only getting a small amount, about 40 minutes, that the teacher's actually teaching instead of just giving them something to do while the class finishes or people show up, because they don't want those students to be missing. And I never heard that people were actually struggling to finish the program. I thought everybody was graduating with full careers. That's what I heard before. But if we're paying this money for people to go, have we looked into switching our schedule so that people are leaving during times that they may be free from something to do at their high school or coming back? So instead of 80-minute schedules, we switch over to a 50-minute schedule or 55-minute schedule. So they have a free period that they leave from and they're not missing out on material. Because that is, and as the year goes by and more people are aware of programs, as people are talk about less college and they're looking at outside programs like this, we might be looking at 80 people next year as the years move on. Can we look at that so that we're not, because I talked to a lot of teachers during the open house, and that's one thing I heard was that they're teaching in the 15 minutes before the class ends, that's when they start teaching. They give the students things to do, keep them busy. And then the first 15 minutes, they're catching up with the students or they're waiting for somebody to show up. So they're not having to repeat material. So have we looked at switching that? So since our population is
We
moving?
haven't dove into trying to change the schedule based on our students that attend CTs and something.
There's no school in the area that there isn't some loss of time. You've also got to factor in travel time. That's one of the issues with it.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like instead of having 4 class schedules and have 6 or so, and they can be traveling in the period in which they don't have a class at the high school.
But that then removes an entire block that they could be pursuing a credit. So there is no perfect answer. It's a little bit of a wag the dog situation if you're looking at 20% of your student population or a bit above that.
Well, one
Change the
thing
entire schedule.
that it would do if you change the slots, in the earlier grades, we'll be able to take on, like some students are, they have five courses in a semester or 4 and then 1 long term or whatever. But somebody can be taking 5 classes, the first 2 years, so gaining more credits, so they're more free towards the ending years.
You're then going to start opening up some significant questions with the CBA, with the number of classes that people are teaching and things like that. So the short answer to your question is no. The schedule hasn't been, how can we accommodate travel to the Hewitt in our schedule? We can look at that certainly, but there's going to be a lot of obstacles.
So let me think about what Edgar said. And I think the bigger question would be, with what Edgar just mentioned, with those students, is there a statistical drop in their grades because of what's happening? And I don't really.
I need to get us, I'm not.
Yeah, you're right, we're not on
We can
track
talk about
with
it, and the board can look at where to put it, but in terms of agenda items, we're focused on the budget, so I don't want to lose, it's a good point, Edgar, and I think we can talk as a board about circling back to that, but I'm just focused on the budget pieces right now, so thank you for raising it.
I have a question on this. Okay, so what proportion of the state, what are they, I know that they have fallen as far as the reimbursement. What are they?
So we get billed 20% of the total tuition cost for VOCAD. The state is supposedly going to cover 80%. The state law says whatever money is available in the state budget gets divvied out based on the enrollment. And if the state funding is short, the sending district is responsible for making up the difference, which it has been doing, and there is no set percentage. It varies every year. And that's one of the very hard things to even predict, especially now that they're saying we can't not let, we have to let the students go.
My question is that our portion's gone up every year, right? Isn't it?
Well, 20% of the increased tuition, so our mandatory portion goes up every year, yes, because the voc tuition goes up every year.
Right.
But it depends on how many statewide go to how much the state has to reimburse. And then we just get billed, so it's fluctuated.
So there's years it's gone.
It's years that it's not been as high as other years, and there's no way to predict that. And even like the Hewitt, Laconia doesn't find out until July what they're going to get from the state the year before. And by the time they go through their calculations, it may be January before I get the bill to supplement what I owed from the year before.
So the increase you're seeing is not only an increase in enrollment, but it's an increase in cost of tuition as well that we anticipate.
And that may be another area that might be a good expendable trust down the line.
So this isn't really a budget question, but
And then I'll put it in the park. But go ahead.
programs at Winter School or Laconia that we could potentially offer in-house? I'm thinking like early childhood, right? We have a preschool program. Why aren't we utilizing, is there something we could do with our students that might be interested in that field? And it's like, I'm all for sending students to Laconia and high school, but if there's something that we, like, we're not going to provide automotive here at basic. Okay, but are there other things that we can do? Something we should.
I don't know the requirements around something like that.
Yeah, I don't know what the certification requirements are, and if they are subject just to CTE, but I can look into that.
I guess I'm going to be the bad guy here, but I'm just going to say it. I think it's great that we continue to send more students to these programs. The problem is, and I think they're half-day programs too, in my experience. So it's not 70 kids out of high school, it's 35.
Yep.
But there are less kids at the high school because of these programs. And at some point, doesn't that impact the budget as far as, why would the budget of high school continue to go up if we have less kids out of high school? And I'm not necessarily saying the budget should go down, but does this provide an opportunity for, maybe the class sizes are small, can we provide class sizes? Can we offer different classes at the high school? Because we have 70 students, maybe the year after 80 students, going outside of the high school, other locations. I just feel like, yeah, you can look at it as a negative, but you can also turn it into a positive as far as additional offerings that we can provide, because in theory, we could have more capacity.
Yeah. We also can't impact what the state requires us to offer for graduation requirements. So we have to have those. So, but
But
conversation we
it's
can look at.
certainly something to look at. Anything else for Mr. Lynch?
Or maybe she's happy to answer questions.
So, not for this year's budget, this goes back to last year's discussion. That's a very interesting point. I just wondered, outside of budget season, if the school board would consider taking a look at that question, because a big driver of budget is the staffing costs, and we all agree we want good quality education for the kids.
So, correct. So tonight, we're focused on the rationale sheets.
Yeah.
And starting next week, we open up a discussion related to, we started to get some information on class size. And we're going to get information on class size of high school so that we can talk about what we want to do. I'm just, so yes.
Yeah, I just want you to
Short
know,
answer.
because I was big on that last year, I'm not necessarily thinking that's a decision in this short time frame. I mean, there may be some very obvious things that pop out, but I'm saying outside of that, it's an interesting question
Yeah.
that John raises.
Yeah. Anything else? Run, no, just kidding, don't run. Oh, no, they literally are running. Okay. Athletics. Freeman.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I don't really have any big things to say on the changes, so I'll open it up.
Go ahead.
So one quick question. Officials for BHS athletics.
Yep.
The amount that's been spent actually had gone down for a number of years. I don't understand why it's gone down.
I will say that the 23-24 actual is not completely accurate just because when there was numbers that didn't get transferred over, it just doesn't look, it's just not in there from part of winter through the entire spring. So that number's gonna be closer to that $18,000 number.
Where is it? Where is it?
It was, yeah, it was spent, but it's just not reflected in this. Because I talked with Michelle about it when I saw the actual that was on the line, to be like, that doesn't look right. And when we look back on the spreadsheet that we put together to track all those numbers, some of those just hadn't been pulled from that. I don't know that.
So, yeah, something to follow. But like, I'm looking at it going, well, we budgeted $24,000 for this fiscal year. And even though the numbers going down for next fiscal year, I'm still questioning whether we over budgeted this year.
And I would say probably, because I know that last year when the budgets were, or like it would be 2 years ago now when the budgets were due, I was not around at the time, so I just sent Debbie the spreadsheet of all my stuff that had like the max of everything, and usually with that, I know some of the sports probably aren't gonna run for the official fees, that's why I normally put it down, but what I shared with Debbie is what she plugged into the program, so that's why that number would be what it is.
So I'm looking at for the request, officials for the middle school 13, officials for the high school 20, and then fees for NHIAA at 28 grand.
Yep.
If we're paying for, I'm just kind of curious, what do we get
So
from
we-
NHIAA? For
So,
28 grand?
so that's not all NHA, like the hockey split that we contribute to the hockey program every year is in that line item. So it's not just fees that are paid to the NHI, like alpine ski rentals for the hills, golfing stuff, the indoor track fees are in there.
So fees for meets.
Yeah, so there's a lot of
And
them.
NHIA.
And then the only other thing that's lumped in there that wouldn't fall under that would be the hockey. Yeah, because the football one used to be in that same line. And that's why you'll notice like the actual before was like $5,000 more than what was budgeted for. Because I basically just took what we were contributing towards the football program out of that number.
So, the athletics budget has increased almost $100,000 in 5 years.
So I think 21, because I know like the COVID made a lot of those numbers very unique. So it's kind of hard to compare the two.
See, Bobby, now we look at it.
That's nice to hear, actually.
Transportation doesn't seem to have gone up much.
No, it seems to have stayed, and it's such a hard, because I don't know obviously the back end of the contractual numbers with the company, but it's also hard to predict in what season we're heading to White Mountain and what season we have trips to Cone at White Mountain and Berlin, so it's so hard to necessarily predict what it will be, so we try to keep the number pretty consistent.
Because what did we see for student transportation increase? That was 10%, that was close to 20%, wasn't it?
First year, on this budget though. That's not what it's, I would say it's 7.5% for regular transportation.
Just a general rule of thumb when you're scheduling with other EDs. Are we trying to, I guess I use baseball and softball as an example. Are we trying to get the baseball and softball teams to the away games on the same day at the same site? Because obviously they have different fields. Rather than today baseball is going to Prospect Mountain, tomorrow softball is going. It's like
So I know one thing that's changed, and it's been the same way since I've been there, but we no longer like schedule with each other. There's like a master scheduler who puts out the schedules to each of the schools.
Well, then they don't care. Our buses.
But the thing about it is not all baseball schools are softball schools.
Yeah.
So usually what happens, they try to, whenever, that school that doesn't have baseball or doesn't have softball, they try to get the games in with a different school that would fall on that same day, as to not disrupt it too much. I know they try to get baseball and softball together when they can. But basketball is a lot easier because every school has a basketball program, so you can match up with the schools that way.
Additional questions?
So if that, what Randy pointed out was, it's not quite 100, it's more, I guess, close to a little over 80 of an increase. Are we seeing an increase in student participation?
For last year and this year, or the previous year into the previous year, last year was an increase. So yes, I do feel like we're starting to get higher participation.
Because it looks like the huge jump was from 23, 24 to 24, 25, from 182 or 183 to 209.
That big jump, Mark, is supposed to be funded the athletic trainer at a higher number. So if you look at the difference in purchase services.
Oh, yeah, I did not.
So the trainers in this budget?
Yeah, we actually reduced it by $5,000 if they're in hard time.
Oh, then I can ask my question. That was, did we get a trainer?
We have not at this
Okay.
point, working with the. Chroma.
Yeah, I know that was a challenge last week.
Challenge again this year, that's why we're reducing about 5,000. We're not confident that we'll be spending it for this next year.
So you're gonna need to use, or try to use the Belmont Tire?
Yeah, we use our imaging services.
Yeah. Out of this budget or is it somewhere else?
We're currently working with them for this year, and we would do the same next year if we're not able to find a trainer.
Yeah.
But either way, this number, even if we were to find a trainer, should at least cover all the games.
Just out of curiosity, I'm referring to the matter of money or just not anybody?
Yeah, I know schools that have it as positions within their school district that are still having a hard time trying to fill it.
Okay, anything else? Okay, payment. 10.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
General overview of the tech budget. I'm pretty pleased to say we have a reduction on almost every single line, with the exception of the purchase professional services. And that basically comes down to two things, which are our wireless access point licenses that are up this year, and our Nutanix server support, which is also up this year. That's pretty much the.
Talk a little bit about the computer assisted instruction.
I believe that is the 2225 function is the entire tech. The way it's laid out on the budget, or the way it's laid out on the paper makes it look like it's its own line, but I think that is the sum of the entire technology budget. If I'm right.
You are correct.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
2225 is state computer assisted instruction is what the state calls the function.
Is that $43,000 increase we're seeing? that what you're talking about?
Well, 2225 is the function that we use.
Yeah.
And it's not a particular line item, it's all of the items that have the 2225 function. It's computer assisted instruction. So it's the entire IT department.
Okay, so what I'm asking is on page 1, the line item down.
The 43,417 increase, that is the wireless access points and the service reports that Brandon was talking about.
So that's a one-time deal, we won't see that kind of cost next year, or you don't?
Correct. Most of them will not be seen next year.
And that's buying new equipment.
That's just the licenses in order to use the equipment that we currently have.
And how long's the license?
So the wireless access point licenses are, and the reason the number is so high is because it's a 5-year contract. And the reason I pushed it out for a 5-year, although it's a higher number now, is that the licensing is eligible under E-rate to get a reimbursement for. And that also puts us, 5 years puts us at the end of the life of the access points. So the next time we go to replace all the equipment, we're able to build in the support for the next 3 or 5 years as part of the rollout of the new APs.
So you're paying for a 5-year license one time next year on this one?
Yep.
And there's a potential offset, potential revenue offset, so it's grant eligible.
E-rate.
You'll have to tell me what E-rate stands for.
Yeah. So I'm not sure, it's the electronic reimbursement to have schools increase their computer access. So it's a government program that was started probably 25 years ago to help districts, especially school districts that had high free and reduced populations, to be able to afford technology. And various communication vendors have to pay a portion of their revenues into this program to help promote infrastructure for IT purposes.
Thank you. Computer replacements, like they're down.
So,
Are you in good shape there?
yes, actually, we're in very good shape. So, one of the projects I mentioned at the previous meeting was we were able to purchase 125 new Chromebooks for SREA staff members. So that was part of the CIP as part of next year, but I was able to pull that out because we were able to get those this year.
Other questions?
And to elaborate on that, Sean, the ones that they have now are actually in pretty decent enough shape that we can hand them back out to other staff members. So.
Okay. See, I keep looking to make sure no one has questions about. Okay. Buildings and grounds. I think it's last but not least.
Last but most.
Yeah. All right. Anything?
Oh, I think a lot of these are stranded costs. You every year, the contracts and services, things that are mandated by the state, the fire alarm, the fire testing, a lot of this stuff is just costs that we incur every year, so it's just a repeat. That costs a lot. But I think we put in a pretty responsible budget this year, and we did the best we could with it.
A clarification, page 1, line 5, that's BMS, correct?
Correct.
So on that same page with CES on the repairs and maintenance and PHS repairs and maintenance, they both took a jump, the other schools didn't. Is there something there that We've got a big repair expecting you to come.
CES has been having a lot of breakdowns, repair and maintenance, that's where that money comes from to fix things. And CES has been going up steadily every year. So we're trying to get ahead of it and budget with a number that we can live with, basically, or we're gonna overspend.
So the reason I was asking the question is that sort of triggered my mind. Is it equipment failure, we should plan to replace equipment, or is it like the roof repair at the building high school, start thinking about capital projects?
We're looking into all the equipment, the rooftops and the air handles and stuff now, through the Building and Grounds Committee, and we're looking at that now. We are gonna be getting some stuff in the CIP at some point with cost and trying to.
Are you gonna have a handle on that before this budget? So the reason I'm asking the question is, I understand if you decide to do a project and ask for capital project, suddenly there's money that's going to show up in the warrant, it's probably going to be more minutes. But on the other hand, if you get there and you got a good handle on it, now we're thrown away in the case of, I'm making this very simple, but in the case of high school, $12,000 on a problem, if you get a sense, you really need to do a larger deal.
I'm sorry, can you speak just a little bit?
Huh?
This going over here.
Oh,
The
sorry.
sorry.
It's very loud.
The reason I'm asking the question on the two schools is simply I see that increase, which my first reaction is there are some repetitive failures and things are starting to fail. So are we really, if the Buildings and Ground Committee has got kind of a sense of this coming, maybe even their hands around it, do we really need to talk about a capital project and stop and say, okay, we understand we got to do the repair this year, maybe we don't, but the bottom line is we're going to keep seeing these costs go up. And the real issue is we need to do a replacement.
So any of these major replacements here, so don't get hung up on the word equipment in there. So we have any major purchases, particularly for building and grounds, that are on our CIP.
No, I know, I see it.
This would encompass, for example, we have a major pipe break with our heating system. We have to replace some old cast iron pipes. That might not be a good example to cast iron for heat, but something like that where we have some of these older infrastructures in our buildings that when they go down, it's a significant cost.
We're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm saying right now you're fixing year to year and maybe just looking at 2 years is not a trend. I'm not arguing the equipment or the building or structure needs to be dealt with. I'm not arguing that at all. I'm just saying is this an indication where we're starting to have aging and we should think about it. Bigger thing, maybe not for this year, but start thinking about it for next year.
We're thinking about the air handlers. Trust me, that's more than you want to deal with.
Yeah.
So it's cheaper to keep fixing the old stuff.
Considering the federal government mandates the air handlers, don't they? We have to be up to compliance.
Yeah.
We're looking at what was it, $11.5 million, and we have multiple buildings that are all going to basically give up at the same time.
Okay.
That's the worst case scenario. We're looking at
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm just letting you know.
Tell me something before that happens.
We have something that's kind of, I mean, Steve, for the most part, stays on top of it. If something breaks, he fixes it. But I mean, if you were, like, when you're, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
But if we were to do that, you're talking millions of dollars. Do you want?
No, I'm not jumping to that thing.
I'm just saying.
I'm just saying, I think you're
it's
looking
coming
at
on.
year-to-year repairs and deciding when you need to bite off something. I'm only looking at the change from one year to the next.
We've been attacked like the paving up at the high school, because that parking lot's.
No, I know, I've seen it. I'm not
Yeah, we
arguing that.
tried tackling big projects like that, and then, like, paving's pretty much done for the district, except for the middle school's getting pretty terrible too. It seems like paving's constantly going on.
Okay.
We redirect the money once those big monstrous things.
Just asking
We got
a
the
question.
air handlers that we just had a presentation last week on, and that was pretty
I'm not
scary.
complaining about the number. I think it really is, it really tells us you got a bigger.
I understand what you're saying, but we're.
And a lot of these repairs aren't on the same piece of equipment.
They're on the same?
They're not
Okay.
on the same piece of
Okay.
equipment. So it's not like, okay, we repaired this 3 years in a row now, it's time to replace it.
Right.
It's different things that are going at different places.
So that one, the wood furnaces goes down by pellet.
Okay, well, that
is
pretty much
something
gets to what
Yeah.
my
I
question
mean,
was.
one heat pump is a couple $1,000 not installed.
No, we're good.
So,
I'm
I mean, it's
good.
just
I think
that
we-
kind of thing you can't predict.
The lease payment, that's on the energy equipment.
That's the energy upgrades, yep.
When does that lease end?
I have to go back and look. I think 30, but I'm not sure. I have to go back and look.
Oh, it's that far out.
It was a 17-year,
Okay.
15 or 17, yeah.
I think, and this always trips me up, so I'll own that right up front. The heating. The heating never makes sense to me, and I ask this every year, but it still doesn't. So we're doing an increase in pellets because we're anticipating using more, but we're not lowering our propane costs. I don't get it. Like, I don't get it. Like, to me, if we're using more, we theoretically would reduce.
If it works out that way. If the pellet boilers stay running the way they're supposed to stay running, we actually use the pellets. It's all anticipating what you're gonna use, and when the pellet boilers go down, and they're down for 3 or 4 weeks, then you need the propane to back that up. So you're not gonna spend as much in pellets, but you're gonna spend more in propane. So it's a hard number to come up with, it's a hard solid number to get. I gotta tell you.
And I get that, but essentially, just to be clear, we're budgeting twice in this case. So in this case, we're budgeting, right, so we're budgeting more for pellets because we want to use pellets more.
And the cost goes up.
Fine, but I'm just saying these numbers here. But then.
I think what you're getting at is if we budget more for pellets and a system goes down on that burner, why can't we suck the funds back out of the pellet line to then pay for propane?
Yeah,
Yeah,
just overspend on them.
Don't double, right? You can overspend one line and underspend the other.
Correct,
Don't
so
double.
I'm just wondering why we're budgeting more in one and not lower in the other, and then we overspend the propane line if we have to switch to it. But I'm just from how we normally budget, if we're gonna anticipate using it more, then I don't think we should essentially double budget. That's all. If I was reading this right. I'm not trying to be, I get what you're saying, I'm just saying, we can just use that extra $15,000, $16,000 to cover propane if the pellet goes down, right? I usually don't read it right.
The section on page 1 is dry field now being heated. Did we actually charge the cost?
We've never been charged for water on that field. And the town caught up to it, now we have to pay for it.
On our athletic fields, would it be worth drilling a well for water, especially long-term?
I don't know. Well, I've never researched it, to be honest with you.
That dollar amount, that's, I assume they're also metering like the school buildings and stuff, right, in addition to the fields, so.
Water is spread, all the water we use, not just the playing field, but we had an increase because Bryant wasn't being needed. And we've had an increase in water cost, I believe, in Belmont as well.
I mean, if you drilled an irrigation well, maybe it would work. If you tried to convert the municipal water with a well, I can just tell you what we spend at Canterbury Spruce, which is 16 little units on maintaining the water supply of the well. It's ugly, especially today, the cost of drilling as well. I did have a question on page 4 or 5. Most of the notes I get, the one at the bottom of page 4 is a little cryptic, and I was trying to figure that one out. Clarify, this is one that says DHS baseball field drainage 50,000, bathroom partitions 15, parking lot and paving total 547, less 453 to be taken from expendable trust, impact to GF budget 94,000. That's in other words, that is, we're going to put in the operating budget $94,000 of this money.
Yeah, and then if you look, it's the 94,000 is under the 2025, 2026 request.
Yeah, I saw that. I think it would just be kind of interesting to see if a separate component, some separate structure that says this is what's coming out of the expendable trust proposed for 2025. And then what the balance is in the trust.
So we get to those when we go to the CIPs.
The trust information is under the trust fund balance.
Guys, my question is just, well, what's the balance in the trust fund? And then why do everything but 94,000 of it? Like, what was the thinking behind putting 94,000 in the operating budget versus using it all out of the trust?
We had other items, and this is all based on the CIP that goes out, and that's in the book too. So we've gone out several years, and they tried to maintain $100,000 out of the general fund, and then the rest goes out of the CIP. So if you look at building improvements under CES, which is $7,600, that has $37,600 for bathroom renovations, $30,000 from the expendable trust. And then we also have a line under the Belmont Middle School that $15,000 is to come out of the expendable trust. So that ends up with no impact on the general fund budget. So it's all part of the planning for the CIP. We come up with what we plan on doing, but try to maintain $100,000 of those capital projects in the general fund. And that's part of the Senate Bill 2 rationale and how we develop the default budget.
The drainage at the high school baseball field, did that drainage fail, or is it?
It's never been right since the day they built the field. Honestly.
It's got a crushed pipe, right?
Huh?
There's a crushed pipe under there. That's what I think.
It's inadequate drainage is what it is, but it's just inadequate drainage. It's never been right. We got into the field about 3 weeks ago. We found 4 holes that the pipe runs out from, and it covers the infield and it stops. So the infield is the only thing that has drainage on it. That's pipe up. The outfield has 0.
So we did look at that, Jeff, and the quotes that were coming in were much higher than that.
Really?
Yeah.
How far you got to run a pipe?
Particularly the only one that responded to the request. So we were maybe people come look at it, and those that did much higher than $50,000.
How far you got to run the pipe? How far you got to run the pipe, the drainage pipe? I take it, I don't know how you get the drainage. My question is not an idle one, because I just replaced my septic system, so it wasn't anywhere close to this much money. And I mean, I replaced the whole damn thing, so I don't know. Maybe it's still, anyway. Bathrooms? So that was quite a topic of conversation last year. Between what got budgeted last year and what's here, is that pretty well resolved with that student person? Let's bring it up, and by the way, I saw firsthand kind of what her complaint was.
Talking about the hot water came last year, and then the high pressure.
Well, some of the bathrooms could use some repair work, I'll put it that way. I didn't go into all of them, but.
That's what's in this budget, Jay. So we've been tackling bathroom renovations.
Yeah.
Not doing a whole school, every bathroom in the whole school at one time, 1 year.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So in the high school, this is specific to the academic wing bathrooms.
Okay.
Where we've done renovations to the bathrooms that are closer to the gymnasium and cafeteria. So the high school, that's specific to the academic wing bathrooms. Middle school, that's specific to the bathrooms that are up by the library. And CES is.
So there'll still be some work next year, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
first one. Yep.
Page 3, that line item on contracted services grounds, 54,000 increase, 55,000 increase. I read the note. Are those ongoing costs, or is this a one-time deal?
I didn't catch that, I'm sorry.
I'm looking at on page 3, the 54,000, almost $55,000 increase, and then there's a note. I assume the note is trying to explain the increase. Is that going to be an ongoing cost year to year, or is that just something you got to catch up on this year?
So the contracted lawn maintenance is something that the board decided last year. We were contracting to do all the mowing for CES and BES.
Yeah.
In part because we couldn't find a third grounds person.
Okay.
And the crew that we have could not keep up with all the buildings. So we did contract out those services, so we were able to reduce the salary in the grounds line for that third person. That is going to be an ongoing cost, and we typically have some tree removal work that needs to be done. So there is going to be ongoing contracted services to maintain the grounds. Whether it's going to be that $57,500 every year, I'm not sure.
But it was cheaper, didn't?
Right, we saved money by contracting.
I remember the discussion on the
Yeah.
third grounds person, so this is less expensive than that salary.
Correct.
Okay.
When you take the salary and all of
Okay,
the
I'm good.
associated cost
I didn't
items.
remember the numbers.
I remember that as the offset from
Okay.
this last conversation.
And when you get into these individual department, you don't see the salary pieces. because
No,
they
I'm
really don't-
okay, I just didn't remember
Yeah.
how much of an offset that was.
Other questions? Seeing nothing? Thank you.
Thank you.
So that concludes the rationale sheet. The meeting with administrators. Next week, next Tuesday, we'll be tackling other components of the budget as a whole. I know Randy has something to bring up regarding layout. Okay, there's a layout issue, so just so it's not a secret, Randy wants to talk to you about layout.
Okay.
So, do we have other questions for tonight?
No, I just want to note that I'm away next week, so I will not be available. And if I can follow a little bit on Edward King's side.
You what?
I'll
Sorry.
try to follow on Edward King here,
Oh,
if possible.
nice. Yes.
Sorry.
Do you host that goes live?
Not live, it'll be,
Yeah, then you post it on YouTube, and then in the Belmont, Canterbury.
The school district is live.
Yeah, the school district is live.
Oh,
Yeah, that one. Okay, any other pieces?
So you can put this in other sections. These are all moves that Debbie had sent out. These are budget committee members, but put this in other.
All right. Any other public communication or correspondence? Seeing no one in the audience. I don't think we have anything in non-public that I know of, so. Discussion. All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Hey, I'm just kidding.